Naoki Urasawa is hailed as one of the greatest manga authors of our time, and it's really no question as to why that is. His stories read as something beyond just manga, and what I mean by that is when I read an Urasawa manga, it really feels like I'm watching a live-action series instead of reading manga. It feels like I'm reading a script or a screenplay instead, or witnessing something that should have 6 seasons of a TV show already worked out. The depth and analysis within his work speaks volumes not only for his creativity, but also his respect to us as readers, not spoon-feeding us the entire story, but letting us put it together chapter by chapter like we are solving some gigantic puzzle, leading us in one direction and then pulling the rug out from under us and then knocking us into another place that we didn't even realize that we wanted to go, and then somehow tying it all in together in this perfect bow. Now, I found that most people hail his story Monster as his greatest work, and I understand why. It is truly a special series that will stand the test of time with an extremely memorable cast of complex characters. But this manga, 20th Century Boys, far exceeded my expectations, even coming from a manga like Monster, and for me personally, I found myself enjoying and connecting with this story in particular much more than I ever did with Monster, and I have plenty of reasons why. 20th Century Boys is a story that would definitely fall into the suspense thriller type of genre, but is also filled with incredibly touching and powerful moments involving a large group of characters that all began their journeys back when they were just little kids. Similarly to stories like Stand By Me or It, and even within the story itself, it references Stephen King and his works a few times, it shows a real, raw look at what it's like to be within those ages of 10, 12, 13 years old, just hanging out with your group of friends. And I feel like there's very few authors that can really get across that sense of authenticity of what it was like to be a kid. I don't know what it is, but I feel like a lot of adults really forget. And this story does play with the idea of how you grow up and you forget all of these details. But every once in a while, an author comes around that really remembers how childhood actually was and can put it into a story. And that is exactly what Urasawa did here. The camaraderie that you have, the adversities that you face, and the things that you find appealing at the time, and how fun it would be to create your own secret base away from the adults, and then come up with plans for your own manga and your own stories, talking about and deciding what would be the best way for an evil worldwide organization to take over the world, and then how you all, as a team of friends, would fight for justice and put a stop to it. Exploring all of the abandoned houses in town and the haunted places and sharing stories and freaking each other out and dealing with bullies and all of those things. Magical experiences that you only have one time in your life because as you get older, the reality of the world starts slowly setting in. Your secret base is destroyed and a bowling alley is built on top of it. Your once giant aspirations to be a rock star and save the world with music start to disappear because you can't catch a break, and then you are bombarded with all of the responsibilities that come over time. Friends start to grow apart and you barely see them anymore. All those guys that you spent every day with for years creating memories, now it all just seems so long ago that you barely remember them. But then you start seeing this strange symbol appear all over town. The one that you had made as your insignia for your small group of friends. The symbol that was just for your friend group. The one that you haven't seen or drawn in decades. And while trying to track down where this symbol comes from and who's using it, you stumble upon a cult of people all praising and worshiping a masked figure that floats down from the sky like a religious messiah, calling himself Friend. And Friend has power and influence beyond your wildest dreams. In fact, he may even be supernatural. Maybe he can resurrect from the dead. And he just so happens to have the status and power to literally create the same giant robot from your childhood prophecy of how the world will end and the resources to put it all into practice for world domination. But who is Friend? Which one of your old friends is doing this, or is it any one of them at all? And that, my friends, is only the beginning of the mystery of 20th Century Boys. This story is broken down into several parts, but it's all one complete narrative. It encompasses nearly the entire lives of its main characters, as in we see them from childhood into decades, and I mean decades, into the future, all tying into the original childhood visions of the destruction of the world and the real-life repercussions of them coming into being before their very eyes, and the great concept of a group of friends as adults that have to reconnect and get back together in order to face a threat from their childhood is a great story within itself, but that's only the first third of this manga. It then continues to go deeper, and the variety of the cast helps it be able to explore so many different directions. And you could say the main character, the protagonist, Kenji, he's just your average guy. And that's one thing I really love about this manga as well. He came up with a lot of great ideas when they were kids, and he also had a failed music career. We pick up with him as an adult having to take care of his niece that his sister just abandoned with him. And Kenji is such a good, relatable guy simply because he's not really that special, and yet at the same time, he is incredibly important and influential to everybody around him. Another friend in the group is a guy named Ocho, and he's basically the resident badass of the group. He had a bunch of monk training and wound up being a muscle for others, going by the alias of Shogun. Yeah, he's a G. Yoshitsune, if I'm pronouncing that right, is another character I absolutely loved. He's the one that founded the secret base when they were kids, and as an adult, he seems to be the most cowardly, and yet time and time again, he really steps up to the plate and becomes an amazing leader, despite what he feels about himself. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. The crux of the story all revolves around their friendship, and then the antagonist, just called Friend. Friend has somehow gathered more and more people into his cult, showcasing incredible powers that might be magic, they might be supernatural, they might be from God. Nobody knows for sure, but uncovering who this guy is basically what you will be doing the entire manga. It just keeps you guessing so well, and you just want to see Kenji figure this out and take this guy down. But he's always one step ahead of them, plotting out this subtle world domination to the point where it becomes more and more serious, and eventually nearly everyone is on board with the cult of Friend, and the very structure of the planet shifts within his favor. He's charismatic, he's prophetic, and he's looked at as something beyond human. There are times in the manga where it will have you absolutely convinced who Friend is, and then something else will happen that will completely shift your perspective once more. And every single time it does this, it's great, and it adds so much more nuance to the story. Urasawa writes in a very specific way, and I noticed that he did the same thing with Monster. He will basically build and build on something within a chapter, and then when it gets to this incredibly ridiculous cliffhanger on the final page, he will then, in the next chapter, cut to something completely different, and then slowly tie itself back into the original cliffhanger, and then leave you with another bigger cliffhanger. And he does this again and again and again. And honestly, it's a great way to keep you reading, but you'll also be incredibly frustrated because you just want to see what is going on. And I mean that in a good way. You'll find yourself sitting there 8 hours later just realizing you spent the entire day trying to figure out who the hell Friend is, and then you'll think maybe Friend is this person, and then there will be a time skip and you'll think that who the hell are these new characters, and then finally it'll reintroduce a legacy character and you'll be like, oh my god, everything makes sense now. And then it won't make sense. I also got to give a quick shout out to the character of Donkey. He was barely in this story, but he has such a powerful impact on it. He is a true MVP. Now, obviously, there's so much to dive into within this story. Since it's essentially a mystery that you're discovering as you go, it's very hard to talk about it without getting into specific spoilers, but I can say that I was so captivated by it that I lost myself within this world for some time. Of all the new manga I read this year, I really didn't think I would like anything more than Eden: It's an Endless World, which I really, really loved, but I think that I like this one more. My only criticisms would be two things. One is that sometimes Urasawa's characters can look very alike, and since it's a cast that is huge, and a lot of times as children they look kind of similar, sometimes I was confusing characters for one another and it took me a second to kind of catch up. My other gripe is the confusion with the ending. So one of my subscribers, Yeetus Weeb, shout out to you, he let me know about how the ending of 20th Century Boys, as it appears in the volumes that I was reading online, did not include the alternate ending that is coupled with the 20th Century Boys Perfect Edition, and that there is also an epilogue that is called 21st Century Boys, which all of that information is super annoying, and I hate it. Because where 20th Century Boys ends, well, we don't get the answers to everything, but I thought it ended well. And the epilogue, 21st Century Boys, gives us more explanation, but I'm conflicted because though I liked the explanation and the revelation of Friend within 21st Century Boys, I did not like the story that was happening within 21st Century Boys. So I don't know how I feel about that one. But anyways, though I just read this, I'm no expert with these things, I do want to give my opinions on Friend, but in order to do that, it's a spoiler. So if you have not read 20th Century Boys, then you have my full recommendation, and like I said, of all the manga I read this year for the first time, this is probably my favorite. So please check it out, especially if you like Monster. I think you'll really like this too. I appreciate you guys watching this video, and please give it a like and a comment if you would. Okay, so now I'm going to delve into spoilers. So this is the part where I need a hardcore 20th Century Boy fan to tell me if I am correct or if I'm just being a jerk here, because I gotta explain something. So this is what I gotta. When it comes to Friend, what I enjoyed about this manga is that Friend was more of a concept than a person. Just like a religious figure that inspires so much more than what the original figure was. As long as the plans were set in motion, that influence and that funding, it all continued, and anybody could be Friend. Friend being a faceless character was not just to hide his identity from Kenji and the others, but also so that Friend could be a symbol, not a person. Friend could be anybody's friend when anybody needed one. Friend was never actually supernatural, all of it was tricks from the very beginning. The ropes were there helping him fly, and yet even the people knowing he was using ropes still believed in him. The spoon bending was all a joke. It doesn't matter. It's people's belief in Friend that made him be able to do what he did and that made it real. The concept alone pushed people into worshiping him as a world leader and as a messiah. Just like children make their imaginations true, which is a theme of 20th Century Boys, adults also made Friend true. But as far as the person behind the mask, to me, this is what I believed before I saw the changed ending. Friend was essentially 2 to 3 different characters depending on when in the story it was. The original OG concept for Friend was from Fukube, the original trickster and the kid that had the serious god complex. Fukube, from a young age, basically groomed and manipulated another kid, Sadakio. I don't know if I'm pronouncing these names right. I apologize. Sadakio had no friends, basically, and on occasion, it seemed like Fukube would use Sadakio to do his dirty work for him, including maybe even making him portray himself as Friend from time to time. And by the 21st Century Boy endings, we add in the revelation of Katsumata, who also obeyed Fukube and took over his legacy after Fukube's death, even having plastic surgery in order to make himself resemble Fukube. And he also used Yamane that helped create the new Book of Prophecy for him. And hell, he even used Kiriko, which is Kana's mom, and she was also manipulated by him. So this kid with delusions of grandeur and a flair for the theatrical, making this group of friends believe that he could come back from the dead and had psychological powers, I don't believe he ever actually did. And he used each of them as he needed to, even including using them to be Friend when he needed them to. And the crazy thing is Fukube dies halfway through the story, but the influence and power of Friend was so strong that Katsumata taking over didn't affect anything, and only someone super close to Friend even considered that maybe it was somebody else under the mask. And that guy that thought that got assassinated soon after. So to me, I like the idea of there being multiple friends because Friend isn't a person, Friend is a concept. And that's what I really enjoyed about the story. But then there's this alternate ending thing in the Perfect Edition that implies that Katsumata was Friend the entire time. And I hate that because that goes against what I was loving the idea of Friend to be. having multiple friends following the narrative of the original makes more sense to me. Also, Fukube has so much more characterization than Katsumata that it's kind of thrown in the epilogue of 21st Century Boys, which it was all right. It comes in too late, whereas Fukube was pretty much involved with everything throughout the course of the story. I don't have a problem with Katsumata taking over the mantle of friend, but I don't get why such a drastic change would be made or what Urasawa actually wanted to do with the story. So, having said that, I'm going to stick with my original version of the story that I read and ignore the rest. But that's just me personally, and I'm a first-time reader when it comes to 20th Century Boys, so maybe I'm completely off base here. You guys let me know in the comments. You guys tell me what you think, but overall, I had such a good time uncovering the mysteries of this manga, and I fell in love with so many of its characters. It kept me on the edge of my seat, and I'm super glad that there are still stories out there I can experience that will give me the roller coaster of emotions that this one did. Anyways, let me know all your thoughts on 20th Century Boys down below. Other than that, guys, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you would like to. Help me get to my 100K subscriber goal by the end of the year. And beyond that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And also, never forget the hopes and dreams that you had as a kid. There is still time to do what you love to do and to save the world the way you wanted to.